Welcome back. We're on day 2. I'm really excited you're here. That's progress, right? The second day of the program. All right, maybe that's not a ton of progress just yet, but it's still cool that you're here. So this is going to be a much shorter video than yesterday. We're just going to remind you of some of the things to focus on for this week. And I want to talk a little bit about the food marketing industry, because I think that by becoming really aware of what the food marketing industry is doing, we put ourselves in a situation where we arm ourselves, or more to the point, we defend ourselves against what they're up to. Let's talk about tobacco for a minute. And again, I'm not picking on you if you're currently smoking. We can talk about that another time. I'm talking about marketing here. The tobacco industry, it's now really accepted that they have been deeply manipulative in their attempts to get smoking out there into the population. I want to really focus a little bit on this, because I want to suggest a theory to you that we've been discussing for decades at this point, but that is that I really believe that the food manufacturing industry is significantly more evil and dangerous and manipulative than the tobacco industry ever was. But in order to quantify that, we need to look at how manipulative the tobacco industry really was. So think about this, that in countries around the world, when the tobacco industry got to a place where they got all the adults smoking, they recognized that in order to get people to smoke, they need to get them to smoke younger. And so they started coming up with brands and advertising designed specifically to get young people to smoke. Like, that's pretty evil and manipulative. Let's give another example. That they came up with a cigarette called, one of the tobacco industry companies came up with a cigarette called like death cigarettes. And the cover was like a skull on the front. And they knew that that would appeal to kids in their rebellious style. See, once you get past 30 or 40 years old, you start realizing you're actually not immortal. When you're 16, 15, 13 years old, you feel immortal. So death cigarettes seem like a joke to you. They marketed specifically to try to get the kids to smoke because of two things. One, it's many more years of people buying cigarettes, so there's greater profitability. And also, if you can get kids to smoke, they're more likely to smoke their lifetime. It's harder to get a 25-year-old to get to start smoking than it is to get a 15-year-old to start smoking. So they manipulate, they market early. A better example even is what they did in the case of women. You see, for the longest time, women wouldn't smoke. Before the 20s, women wouldn't smoke. Why? Because women are sort of averse to dirty, smelly behavior, so they don't like it. And so they wouldn't smoke. And the tobacco industry really struggled with this. And so they engaged this guy, Edward Bernays, I believe is his name, and they said, hey, how could we get the women to smoke? And he's like, well, okay. His whole specialty was crowd psychology. In fact, the Nazis stole a bunch of his research to do what they did in Germany. And this guy was very smart about the way populations think. And so they brought him over to America, and they had him look at the world. They said, what's happening in America these days? What's happening with women? What's happening culturally? And here's one of the things they found, was that women were at the beginning of the women's independence movement, the idea that women should have equal rights and equal pay. And so there was this sort of big women's independence thing beginning to build. And he said to the guys in the tobacco industry, he said, well, if we can tie cigarettes to that movement, we can get women to smoke. And so they did that. They started coming up with campaigns and so on that would tie the idea of independence and equality to cigarettes, so women would feel like when they smoked a cigarette that they were now equal to men, and would have equal rights and all this kind of stuff. And so maybe you've even seen, and if you haven't, you can go Google it right now. But there's a poster that really depicts this in the most beautiful way. And you've got this woman. She's got the bandana on, a little grease on her face. She's wearing blue jeans and I think if I remember correctly, like a white men's dress shirt tied off in a knot. And guess what? Cigarette in her hand, and the slogan for Virginia Slims is, "You've come a long way, baby." In other words, now you're just as good as a man? Really? I mean, how manipulative is this? We're gonna take your deepest emotional need as a population, and we're gonna link it to our cancer-causing, death-causing, healthcare-destroying habit, right? So the tobacco industry has been pretty evil over the years. What I want to suggest to you is, as I said earlier, I believe that the food industry is worse. I do. Not every brand, not every single brand. There are brands out there that are doing the best they can to provide us with good organic produce and ethically produced foods and so on. But as an industry, when you take the entire industry together, let me describe some of the things that are in the industry. There are companies, I believe most of them are in the eastern United States, but there are companies, you don't know their names. They don't want you to know their names. But their specialty is flavors. You can go into their company, assuming you can get a tour, and they have like jars little eyedropper jars full of flavors so that they can take basically anything and make it taste like anything else. In other words, they don't care about the nutritional load of the food you're eating. They care about whether or not that food is going to appeal to your natural and emotional cravings. And so they do that with flavors. There's like the McDonald's smell in a jar. There's popcorn in a jar. So they're able to trigger our food senses, that is our smell and our taste, with chemicals so as to get us to eat things that we wouldn't normally eat. They can take things that are clearly bad for us and add flavors that our body communicates with us that are good for us and trick us into eating. This is the food industry. The food industry that can only make more money by getting us to eat more food, right? I mean, once everybody's eaten, there's no more profitability. So sure, they can fight with each other, and one food manufacturer can compete. McDonald's can compete against Burger King, right? Try and get you to come to McDonald's instead of going to Burger King, and they can compete with each other in a traditional sort of battle, or they could also rely on simply saying, well, who's already eating here, and let's supersize them. Let's get them to eat more. Once they're already in our store, the marketing money's already spent, so for a tiny little bit more money, let's give them a whole lot more food, because that's pure profit for us. The food industry is dangerous. So one of the things I want you to pay attention to this week is how they do it. What does a food advertisement look like? How are they manipulating your emotions? The next time you see a commercial where there's a nice steaming lobster or a steaming steak or a steaming whatever, I want you to know something about that steam. See, I used to own a film studio, and we did special effects for major movies and commercials and all that kind of cool stuff. And let me tell you something. The steam that you see coming off that food, it's not steam. It's a chemical. It's a chemical that they sprinkle on the food that produces that steam look so they can photograph it on their schedule instead of having to get all the, when you're shooting stuff like we are here with lights and cameras and stuff, you have timing issues, right? And so they could not rely that the food would be steaming and looking good at exactly the same moment that the cameras were focused and the tape was rolling and the lights were right. So they have a chemical that they sprinkle on the food, and that steam comes up. That chemical is so toxic that they have to dispose of the food in a way as to make sure that not even stray dogs will eat it. So the next time you see a commercial like that, I want you to notice the lengths that they will go to make the food look really good. How about this? Have you ever ordered food where there was a picture, like maybe up on the wall, and there was a picture of what that food was going to look like? Did the food arrive looking very much like the picture? No, I don't think so. So notice these little things. How about this? I'm always amazed by this. I don't really watch a lot of TV, but when I travel in America, I find myself in a hotel room. Maybe I flick on the TV. Great, I flick on the TV. Here's what happens. First of all, commercial comes on. All you can eat food of some kind. It looks great, chemical steam. It's a family. Look how happy the family is at the buffet. Oh, and look, the family looks healthy. Notice that family, they're not obese. Huh. Interesting, considering that the vast majority of people in the Western world are now overweight, but not in the commercial, right? And so, everybody looks healthy, everybody looks happy, there's the commercial, eat the food, feel good. Then what comes on after that? Almost immediately after that is a commercial for antacids. No, I'm not kidding, it's like right there. It's like, eat all this food and then take this pill to make you feel better. Oh, and then right after that, there's some other commercial for some other drug to deal with your restless legs, to deal with erectile dysfunction, to deal with whatever it is that your food and diet problem. It's like here. It's exactly like that. Here's our food commercial that's going to cause the problems. Here's our antacid that can take away your immediate issues. And here's the drugs we can sell you for the long-term health implications. And it's all right there during your commercial break. Pay attention. This is what's going on all around us. I don't know if you've had a chance to see the movie The Hunger Games. But in the movie, which is like a dystopian future, you have all these populations, the poor, less poor, less poor, less poor, less poor, up to the rich. And the 1% live in the capital, right? And some of the poor people get to go visit the capital. And when they get to the capital, they arrive to an abundance of buffet food. It's called the Hunger Games because everybody else is starving, right? And so they arrive to this buffet of food. And they come from the districts where they're poor and they don't have much food. So they're eating all this food, and then somebody offers them more food. And they say, no, thank you, I'm full. And then the woman hands her a little glass and says, well, drink this, some blue fluid, right? Drink this. It will make you vomit so you can eat some more. Now, I don't know what's more disturbing, that scene in the movie or the fact that that's how we live. That's how we live. In fact, the Romans had that system in place. The Romans had a form of bulimia so that they could eat all the abundant food they had. We have been messing up our diets for a very, very long time. And so I really want you to pay attention to what's being advertised around you, the messages that you're receiving. So while you're doing that, continue this week to pay attention to your dialogue. How are you talking to yourself? How's it gone so far today? What have you eaten? Did it feel good? How did it really taste? How did you talk yourself into it? And here's a little bonus exercise I want you to think about. Later on, after we've removed some things, I've come along and I've said, here's some foods I want you to let go of this week. What are the foods that you're most nervous about giving up? What are the foods that are most likely to cause you to trip up later in the program? That on other diets or other programs you've been on, that was the go-to food. If you were going to give up, if you were going to take a day off, if you were going to jump off the wagon completely, whatever, what are those foods? And the exercise I want you to do, and I think right now would be a good time to do that, is to write down 2 or 3 or 4 of those foods, and then just take a look at what the emotional response you have to those foods are. Like, what are those foods really doing for you? You know, for example, if one of your go-to foods is ice cream, how does ice cream make you feel? Not eating it, I mean the decision to eat it. So that's a little bonus exercise that I want you to add in this week as you pay attention to the food marketing industry, as you pay attention to your dialogue. How are you talking yourself into eating stuff? How are you talking yourself out of eating stuff and then giving in finally to the fact that you're supposed to eat it? And then how is that food making you feel? If you've eaten something that you regard as not particularly healthy, how did it feel when you ate it? How did it feel right away when you were finished eating it? And how did it make you feel half an hour later? Really slow time down and be really observational. You might start to feel a little schizophrenic when you realize how many conversations you're having in there. Good. Slow down, pay attention, keep going. You're on the right track. I'll see you tomorrow.